Hi everyone. I am really happy to share this interview that I did with my dear friend Robin Spielberg. She's one of the most talented people I know, an excellent ornamental, native, and perennial gardener here in my same zone, not too far away from where my garden is. She is also a solo pianist. She's a composer, and she travels all around the world to tell people about the influence of art on our everyday lives. We spent about an hour walking through her garden. I took some photos and videos. I'm very excited to share those with you as well. And we sat down for about an hour to talk about her philosophy, her best practices, and the lessons that she's learned along the way. And she also has a lot of advice to share with people who are just getting started. So I'm really excited to share our interview. I'm excited to share everything that she shared with me. I think that there's a lot of value to get from this. So I hope that you stick around and watch and also enjoy the photos of her beautiful garden and of some of the music that she makes. All right. Thank you for joining me. I wanted to interview you because you have a lot of talents and skills that I don't as an edible vegetable gardener.
And you have a lot of skills that I don't. I'm a flower gardener.
And so for my readers and watchers, it's good to get a little bit more of a diverse perspective in terms of gardening. And I have a lot to learn from you because I don't really think of gardening. I don't think in the same exact way as you. So I'm interested to hear how you relate to it, how it influences your life, and how that differs from the way it does for me.
Yep.
So, awesome. So I'd like to start with a few questions just so that people can get to know you a little bit. What about gardening drew you to it, and when did you start?
Well, when I was a little girl, way back then, we didn't have much of a garden, but my father did. My parents were from Brooklyn, New York. So living in a city, no access to, gardens or gardening. So I was raised, my sister and I were raised in the suburbs of New Jersey, and we had a very small plot of land, maybe, I don't even know if it was half an acre. But he grew tomatoes and very few select flowers, some peppers. And my sister really didn't have an interest. My mom didn't have an interest. I was the one who helped him with that every year, turning over the soil, picking out flowers, and taking care of the ones that we inherited. I remember there were old-time peonies and azaleas, and we learned what they needed nutrition-wise, and took care of them. And I always enjoyed that. And then I lived in Manhattan myself after college for 9 years. And when I moved to outside New York City, I really felt compelled to start gardening again. And I was living in a rental. It was a beautiful, huge house in Upper Montclair, New Jersey, big Victorian house that was divided into 4 apartments inside. And so I worked in New York every day, and the house had nothing in terms of flowers. It had nothing because it was a rental. And I asked my landlord if it would be okay, asked the super if I could plant some things. And he looked at me like I was crazy because it wasn't my house. And he said, go for it, And so the first thing I did, it was autumn, and I went and bought some bulbs, and I realized I had no garden tools, nothing. I took spaghetti spoons and spatulas And that's what I used. First law of economics, do the best with what you've got.
Yep.
And planted bulbs. And I was delighted to see that like about 5 years ago, I drove past that house and they were blooming.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so windy today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what got me into it. And now we live in, rural southern York County, Pennsylvania. And once again, I find myself not with a lot of land, but half an acre and a very steep back hill I just walked you through. And I decided, instead of having the green desert of a lawn, I would love to start gardening in earnest.
Yeah, and it feels like more than an acre. When you walk through it, it really does.
It's half an acre.
Yeah, right. It feels like more than half an acre.
Right, yes, yes.
So you don't need a lot to really start gardening.
You really do not need a lot of land to start gardening. You need to have a curiosity, I think, is the most important thing. And I learned about gardening. I didn't know anything at all. I think plant what you like what draws your attention, flowers that appeal to you. I loved getting gardening catalogs, and I would just read through the gardening catalogs. And that's how I learned pretty much the names of flowers.
Okay.
Just simply by reading through garden catalogs.
Which garden catalogs?
Let's see. I have Baker Creek is a seed catalog.
That's great.
Brex sells bulbs. Van Borgian sells bulbs. There are Gurney's sells both seeds and vegetables and flowers. One of my favorites is the one in Connecticut. I'll think of it in a moment. A lot of heirloom flowers. And that's where I really learned what things look like, how tall they would grow, what their habits were. And then you make lots of mistakes. And sometimes planted something where it just didn't do very well. Like I showed you those beautiful purple irises. Mm-hmm. Well, I have a bunch in the front of the house, which is the western exposure. Mm-hmm. Not one bloomed. Not one. And it's because irises don't like wet feet, and the water was too flat. They love the hill.
That makes sense.
They love as the water drains down. As you see, that's a slope, so they love that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you learn. You go, okay, it bloomed there, but not there, and you try to figure it out.
Right. You have to practice in order to figure out what works.
Right.
At least that's how I look at it.
Yeah, and it's not like it's a design. You plant something and you decide you don't like it where you planted it. You can dig it up and move it, right? And I do some annuals, in pots for colors, but I plant mostly perennials. I would say this garden is 97% perennial.
Well, I did want to ask you, because you do grow edibles as well. Do you enjoy that equally, or would you say you?
I don't. I grow the edibles. I love growing all the tomato varieties because I love making my own sauce. That's something that we're really into in our house. And my daughter's really into. She's moved out now, but I always save some for her. And I use earth boxes and some raised beds and some big pots for tomatoes. And we'll probably get, 6 or 7 gallons of pasta sauce by for the season, which is enough for us. It's just the two of us, and we freeze it. I used to jar it, used to can it, and I realized it only lasted 4 or 5 months that way. It started getting really acidic. I love freezing it now, because now when you freeze it and you defrost it, all the water rises to the top, so you can drain it. You've got this really thick sauce, all the good stuff. So we'll do that, and we'll do salsa and tomato soup and all of that. And I grow peppers and garlic and lots of herbs. And just started with the blueberries. So it's fun, and I love being able to eat what I grow. But the flower gardening, just for me, just feels like a much more, it's like a soulful experience, because we don't need them. We don't need them like we need food, right?
Right.
You grow a victory garden, you grow your edibles because you're going to save some money, and you grow your own, and it's fresher, and it's all very economic and logical and makes sense rationally. we don't need these flowers.
Well, I did want to ask you about that. So being an artist, you're traveling a lot. How do you balance your traveling with and your work with your gardening interests?
Well, it's a good question. I actually am doing double duty when I'm out in the garden because I compose a lot of music in the garden. It's one of the reasons the garden got so big. I now have it divided up into about 24 beds. I didn't realize it at first, but I would come out and weed or mulch or just do some kind of mundane task. And just being out here and hearing the birds and just being out in nature, hearing the wind would inspire me. And I'd find myself like humming to myself. And then I'd stop, I'd run in, go to the piano, work out something. Okay, interesting. Come back out. To a third person, someone watching from the outside, it must look a little bizarre. But I have composed a great deal of music while gardening. Wow. I find like it's when I'm in my what we call the flow state. People talk about that when they're performing. A lot of athletes talk about that when they're running or, competing, that the outside world falls away and they're in that flow state. And that's what I think gardening gives me as the biggest gift. And yeah, it's like the biggest gift. It just feels so soulful. And as you can see, Maddie, back here, that is a driveway to my neighbor. So no one sees this. We're in an HOA, and the front of my house is very traditional, a few plants in the front, like everybody else. And then back here is insane, thousands of lilies, all kinds of stuff. I don't do it for anyone to see it. I want the pollinators, I want the birds. I love doing it. And it feels very, very rewarding. And to answer your question about how I manage it with all the travel, what usually happens is that these bottom two tiers, which is the bulk of the garden, they're on their own. I don't water them. They have to be able to survive in this climate, which is why I'm planting a lot more natives. I pulled a lot of the things out that were not native. Okay. So I learned over the last few years to go in that direction. And so that helps a lot. Nothing gets watered back here. The only thing that gets watered is the vegetable garden. A few things are on timers right around the house. And if I'm away, our daughter will stop by and take care of it. But most of the things have to be, maintenance free. Now, I will come back from vacation this summer and it will be a jungle. Because to be gone for like 15 days is insane.
Really?
You won't recognize it, like how overrun it becomes in that amount of time.
So you're really putting in a lot on a weekly basis, would you say?
I don't think that, to me, it feels like a lot, but it's probably an hour or two every day.
Okay.
And when it comes to summer, if I do an hour in the morning and an hour before or after dinner, that's good.
Okay.
By mid-August, the weeds have won, and I give up on the third tier.
Okay.
Like by the mid-August, it's like, okay,
pick your battles.
Just wait till next season. Like there's nothing I can do because it just runs away. It just absolutely runs away. But I do what I can, and I do a lot of dividing. And under my deck, I call it the plant hospital. I'll divide plants for friends, and we do a plant swap, and people are interested in having some plants. It's fabulous to share. Earlier I know you were admiring some of the hollyhocks, and I failed to mention how I got those. Those were nothing that I bought. I was on tour in, do you know where Orcas Island is? It's off the coast of Seattle, Washington.
Okay.
There are this Vashon Island, Orcas Island, these beautiful little islands off of Washington State. And I was performing there, and the concert promoter remembered I admired the hollyhocks that were growing outside the concert hall. And she sent me a thank you note like a few months after the concert with seeds. And so I planted them in my house in New Jersey. And then when I moved, I took those seeds and brought them here. And my girlfriend moved to a place with an HOA with no garden, and so she dug up her irises, and those are her purple irises. And when I first moved here, I had nothing. And so a fellow musician came over and gave me these pinkish primrose and the yellow primrose that bloomed down there. And all of the daylilies that are around my red bud in the front, those were from another musician who came over and gave them from her garden. And now I know that many of my plants live in other people's gardens.
Yes, mine included. Now your Seattle hollyhocks are now in.
They're in there, and some of the Bloom as Seeds,
yes.
which came from my girlfriend.
Yes.
So I think that gardening is a really wonderful way to build community and to share. I love going through it and say, oh yeah, that plant's from, my friend, or the spiderwort down there is from my neighbor, Bruce. We share all the time. It's really fun.
So, as a thought experiment, if nobody sees this back part of your garden, or the majority of your garden, if somebody were to see it but they didn't know you, what would you like them to infer about you, or what do you think they would think about Robin?
I don't know. They probably think I have a staff. It's just me. What would people think about my garden? I don't know. I think when I think about style, it's a cross between. There are parts of the garden that feel more formal, but there's something very cottage-like, free about it. I don't ever prune anything to a circle or a box in any kind of formal way. I let the flower just kind of be. To some people, it might look a little overgrown by the time we get to midsummer. Like you don't see the mulch at all. One thing blends into the next. But that was kind of my goal.
Yeah, that's the way I like it.
That's why you like it. And my mother-in-law used to say this too, that one of the tricks to a successful flower garden, anyone can have a gorgeous garden in the spring. I mean,
sure.
God gives you spring and things bloom, and anyone. But if you can have a gorgeous garden in the August drought, that's like the true test. So my philosophy is and this is to me where the fun is, Maddie, is you're planning. I'm always planning what's going to bloom when. And I take that graveyard hole approach to gardening. I don't know if you ever heard of that. But basically you take say a big circle, and say I wanted to have flowering bulbs for 3 months. I would dig a big circle and I would throw in, this is the order they would come up. Crocus, then daffodil, then tulips, then alliums, then lilies, oroganthum, lilies, Camassia kuseki. All of these are bulb flowering plants. And in that one hole, you would have like almost 2.5 months of constant blooms in the same spot.
Wow.
So as the daffodils are dying back, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't grow daffodils because the leaves get ugly. Well, the tulips will hide that. And now the tulip leaves get ugly, but the alliums are now, the purple ones are now up. And then those goes down, and the next one comes up. So you're constantly having different color. So this garden in a couple of weeks will look completely different because all this yellow will be gone, the irises will be gone, the peonies will be all gone. But it'll be replaced by thousands of lilies, and will be like mostly orange and yellow.
Yeah.
And then those go away, and then all the echinacea come up, and the black-eyed Susans will be all pink and yellow. So I like being able to have that kind of variety. So if you look at the garden on social media when I post, it does look like I have a lot of acres because there are a lot of flowers, but a lot of things are planted in the same spot. So it's a lot of like up and down.
That's amazing.
And that's the fun of it. That's where the garden catalogs come in handy, because I would read blooms late June, or, a late blooming tulip. So buy an early blooming and a late blooming. Buy a reblooming iris, maybe, right? So that's, I think, really fun that it's always changing. And I really do look forward to the peony season, which is right now, and then stargazer lilies. I always get a little sad because that, to me, means the season's half over.
Well, one final question about how you manage the garden, really, before we move on to a little bit more abstract or philosophical concepts. How do you balance between wildlife habitat, pollinator resources, and sort of aesthetic value?
Yeah, I'm kind of caring a lot less about aesthetic value, believe it or not. I think it's because I, like you, did the master gardening program, and just had a, I don't know, I don't know if it's epiphany is the right word, but there was so much that I didn't know that I didn't know I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. I knew I liked flower gardening, and I was fairly good at it. People always asked me for my opinion and for help, and I loved designing. But it really wasn't until I went through all the courses and I really understood how much our home garden can really help the environment and the pollinator, like how important it could be. And if everyone just planted 1 or 2 native flowers, like what a big difference that would make. So I took out some plants that I really thought were beautiful. I took out butterfly bush, those beautiful purple spikes, because apparently you might see a lot of bees on them, but it's candy. It's not like really healthy food for them to eat. I pulled those out. Rose of Sharon, I had a whole hedge of them. I mean, they were tall and they were all different colors. I had burning bush that turned fiery red. And so I pulled out a lot of things that I found aesthetically pleasing. But, you know, these blueberry bushes also turn a fiery red. And instead of the butterfly bush, I planted senna and a bottle brush, a buckeye that the bees will do much better with since it's native to them. And, you know, we want to eat the honey, right? We want to have the benefits of what they do for us. So we need
I want them to pollinate my vegetables.
Yes, we need to feed them. You know, we need to feed them. Now, I've made, I don't know if you've done this, Maddie, but I made a few rookie mistakes. So they're in that little vegetable bed over there. I thought, you know what? Be a great way to attract pollinators to my vegetables. I planted sunflowers in there.
Oh no.
Now your listeners and readers might not know, viewers, why that's bad. But the sunflowers, like walnut trees, excrete this allelopathic compound.
Juglone.
And guess what happened?
Everything struggled.
Yeah, my tomatoes, peppers, everything, terrible year. He's like, why? There's bees all over the sunflowers. How would you know that?
Yeah.
Like, how would you even know that? They don't say that in a catalog. Like, it's, you learn through the course about the companion planting and the beneficial insects. You know, what insects you should not stomp on. I usually leave the insects alone. And if there's, I now don't plant my squashes until after that cycle of the egg hatching.
Yes.
Because I was getting all the squash spores and I was trying to pick them. I couldn't catch up.
No.
I just could not keep up. And the season's long enough that I can wait.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we're lucky to have a longer growing season.
Yeah, it is longer than where I used to live. In New Jersey, it's I get 2 more weeks on either side.
Wow.
In the spring and in the fall.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's a lot. 4 more weeks.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good. So I wait now so I don't have to deal with those beetles. I really don't like the Japanese beetles. They eat all the roses. So I'll put some insecticidal soap, you know, on that. But I'm less about, like I said, the aesthetic, a little more mindful. Instead of buying like the tropical hibiscus that they sell at the garden center that everyone puts on their patio, I have the hardy hibiscus. That's the one that's meant to grow here. And they're beautiful. They grow these flowers like this big. They're gorgeous. So it's interesting how our garden centers are not educationally based. Like I kind of wish, there was one I went to in Maryland, there was an area and it said NS. I was like, what does that mean? And I realized native species. So they did have a whole area that was native, but most of them don't designate that. So the average person doesn't know and they just buy something they think looks pretty.
Yeah, that's right. Or that fails to thrive in their environment because it's not meant for local conditions.
Well, they want that to happen because they want it to fail, so you go back and buy more. So my failed experiment was I wanted to grow lupines like nobody's business. Well, they thrive in Maine. They look beautiful in Maine and Vermont. Those chilly nights. They do not like our hot summers. No, it just didn't work out. The delphinium, the lupines, it's just not for this area. So if you don't know, I mean, now we have Google, we have all these resources. You could just type in your zip code and write native plants for zip code.
Right.
And you'll get a whole list.
Yes.
And then you could Google those and just click on images and see what they look like. So you could be more informed.
That's right. And as you were showing me around, some plants are appetizing to the local wildlife.
That was actually shocking to me because I knew that some of those things would be gone, but we just did that walkthrough, and I cannot believe how many lilies the deer took out, and the garden phlox this year. Now, I did put up these really ugly screens on my favorite lilies, and they didn't go near them because it's jaggedy. I'll have to do it again for next year for the other ones.
That's right.
Yep.
For edible gardeners, we understand that we're going to at least pay like a 20% nature tax for, insects, mice sometimes.
It's a good way of putting it, nature tax.
Yes. Well, I mean, nothing comes for free. So, you're asking, in my opinion, you're asking the environment to kind of host whatever you're up to. Right. And it doesn't come for free.
Well, you saw my bunny before, right? That she's not even afraid. You could go 2 inches next to her. She's like, "Hey, Robin, how are you?" My neighbor has a good philosophy. I asked him, "What do you do?" And he goes, "I just plant more than they can eat." And I think that's probably the better philosophy than getting upset.
Right.
They took out some of my favorite lilies, but I have a lot more. I have others that are going to bloom, and it's fine. I like to have enough that I can cut a bouquet every day. I love that. I always love the idea that you cut fresh flowers for your house every day.
They're everywhere.
Yes.
In the bathroom.
I put them in my bathroom. I put them. I can't. There's one place I can't put them because I don't know if I put them on the kitchen table, the cats just like to do that, but they don't go elsewhere. So
okay.
But it's fun to do that, and it's also fun to if you're going to someone else's house, bring a bouquet from your home garden and bring it to them.
Yeah, people. Flowers you buy them at the store, grocery store, you know. But when you know that they've been grown by somebody else, it's a little more magical. Right. I would say.
I think it satisfies a maternal feeling too.
I did want to ask you that.
Plant babies.
Yeah. Do you feel like, well, 2 questions. So what do you think it is about gardening, either ornamentals, edibles, or a mix? Why do you think that has such a hold on humanity in general? And do you think that it has any sort of special connection to femininity or what it is to be a woman?
Yeah, it's such a great question. It's a 2-part question. I love the feeling of having my hands in the soil. Now, I'm a concert pianist, so my mother used to scream at me, that's a terrible hobby for you. Mm-hmm. And yes, I've had some cuts and some bites that weren't good. But I just love the connection to the earth, for lack of a better way of putting it. It's just being out and digging through. And you scoop down the soil and you see a worm. And you're like, look at you, so busy doing your thing. Yeah. I just think it's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to connect. And I do feel that it does tap into some kind of feminine, maternal feeling, but it doesn't have to be feminine. I just think it's a feeling because I know many men who garden, and it feels like you're taking care of something that's bigger than yourself, right? Something that's not going to love you back, or you're taking care of it. Mm-hmm. You're stewarding it. That's the better word, right? We bought this house, and apparently 60 or 70 years ago, this was all orchards. And there was a canning factory in town in New Freedom that pretty much employed the entire town. People from this area say that when in high school, everyone worked there. And then the land was sold and left dormant for a very, very long time, like 40 years. And they knew eventually a development was going to go in. Well, here I am in this development. And I buy it because we wanted to live in a quiet, rural place. But now the orchards are gone. They took off the topsoil. It was just clay. And I'm like, how can I take care of this and restore it somewhat? Mm-hmm. Because there were no birds. There was nothing. There was not a single squirrel. We didn't have a single tree. Nothing. And so I planted that one in the back. There was a maple like this big. This redbud planted itself like in the perfect spot. So we have some shade. We planted a Washington hawthorn from the Arbor Society. Gave them some money. They gave us a couple of little seedlings. And now that there are all these trees, you can hear the birds are singing. We have squirrels and rabbits and chipmunks and bees. And everything came back. Like the life came back. Yeah. I know that there are owls' nests back in here. And I just think, and there's a fox den in the back. It's just so lovely to be able to have that. Mm-hmm. And as a home gardener, we can do that in our, even with a little plot of land. Right?
Well, for me as an edible gardener, it might be a little bit different as for perennials, but not completely different. I do go through plants at a much quicker rate than you. So the majority of the things in my garden are annuals. So for instance, I had to take out my spinach plants, my cilantro plants.
Oh, it's probably already bolted because you're in a hoop house, right?
Well, those weren't, but I totally harvested all of the cilantro. So
wow.
I got about 2.5 pounds.
Wow.
And then for my spinach, it's been giving me leaves for about a month. And I've had many, many pounds of spinach. But, you know, the sort of life and death cycle in my garden is very fast compared to a perennial garden. But has the garden influenced the way that you view life or death or beauty?
Well, I can answer it this way. When I left my house in Montclair, New Jersey, a friend said, "Oh my God, how can you leave? How could you leave the garden?" Mm-hmm. And I said, "Oh, it's fine." And I was so detached. And I said, "I don't think you understand. I don't care about the garden. It was doing it." Mm. And I feel the same way about this one. Like if for some reason I had to leave here and move somewhere else, okay, because I don't feel physically or emotionally really attached to it. I want the chance to do it. And I get great joy in digging and taking care of it and making it aesthetically pleasing for myself and whoever might see it, online, if I post, and enjoy the edibles. But as you know, as master gardeners, we're now volunteering in other people's gardens, right? Community gardens. And I volunteer in a pollinator garden. And I tell you, I get just as much pleasure going there. It's not my garden.
Right.
I love being with some other people and taking care of it. I take pride in it. I love when someone comes off the rail trail and stops over and says, "Oh, this is a nice garden. Tell me about it." And I love telling people about it. I love telling them that I got this plant from this person in Washington State, and this one from my friend who now passed away. And this area of my garden I dedicate to my great aunt, and this area of my garden I dedicate to my mother-in-law who passed away, and she's now she was also a master gardener. And those attachments feel like something.
So, for me, it's a totally different experience.
Yes.
Which is interesting because I feel very emotionally attached to like my spinach plants.
Yeah.
Every year I feel it's difficult for me to get rid of them because they've given so much to me.
Yes.
And so, I sort of have like a burial ceremony
yes.
where I either give them to the chickens or I put them on my compost.
You thank them.
Yes.
Well, I do feel, look how I took care of those lilies back there. Mm-hmm. Those smell so great. The entire house has this fragrance, so I do appreciate them very much. And when I do cut a bouquet, I say thank you and bring them in. I say thank you. Who was the poet that said, "A thing of beauty is a joy forever"? And there's another poem that says you need all these different things in life, but don't forget to grow hyacinths for your soul. And I left that bulb out of the equation in my masquerade. You can grow hyacinths too. It's another one. But it's true. It's like something that feeds your soul. It's a very human thing to do. We're the only species that does this. There are no other animals or beings on the planet that garden.
Isn't that interesting? Aristotle said that the definition of man is that we're a rational animal. And that's under question in some way, because, you know, octopi show some amount of rationality, so do chimps and things like ravens and even dogs to a much lesser degree.
Right.
So maybe the actual definition is that man is a gardening animal.
Man is a gardening animal. Also, we're the only animals that go into caves and feel compelled to make drawings and etchings and tell our stories. And that's what we are, artistic. We're the only ones that need to do that. It's a soulful thing. And we are also the only beings that come into the world and learn that we're not going to be here forever. We know we're going to die. And we're the only species that know it.
That's right.
So there are all of those differences, but we are the only species that can garden and do garden and love gardening. And I hope that everyone finds some kind of joy in it. I was just in New York City 2 weeks ago for a sad occasion. I had a friend who passed away.
Oh.
But he lived in New York City, and he had this little balcony filled with plants. I mean, it was gorgeous. He was growing azaleas and rhododendron and some trees, and he had the penstemon, and he just was doing that in New York City.
That's very impressive.
I mean, it is impressive. And I know that in Europe, my friend lives in Germany, and a lot of the homes there have rooftop gardens, have green roofs, as they call it.
Should normalize those.
Yes, absolutely.
So would you consider then gardening to be an art form?
I'm sure many people think of it that way. I mean, look at all, there's so many books on the art of gardening, and like, I don't think I'm going to be asked any time, you know, my garden has probably too much chaos on it to be considered, you know, too artful, but it's a combination of me planning it and letting things happen. Like, as you see, they're all that milkweed. They like, just let it be. I just let it be because I went, they're native and they're here, and the caterpillars might land there, and, you know, let it go. If I were really very controlling, I would pull a lot of things out that had volunteered and keep it all organized. But I think of it more as a collaboration between me and nature. So yes, I do my planning, and then nature makes decisions. Some things volunteer. Sometimes, as you said, nature will eat some of the things, or we'll have a hailstorm or a drought and some things won't make it. No tears over that, ever. Ever. You know? There's always next season, and the idea is just to plan it and enjoy it. But I think it's an artful collaboration, but you can't really control it like you can control other art forms, like playing the piano or composing or a dance routine or a skating routine. Like, you can't, there are too many variables.
Interesting. Never thought of it that way.
I've only seen it a few times, like in really high-end botanical gardens. Like here in Pennsylvania, we have Longwood Gardens.
Yes.
And it's gorgeous, but there must be 30 gardeners for every plant. I mean, if there's one leaf that has a black spot on it, it's plucked before anyone could see it.
Yes, the Chelsea Gardens just had their annual show of sorts, and the photos coming from that are really mind-blowing.
Yes.
And there are a lot of right angles, and there are a lot of sort of unnatural shapes and things like that. So,
oh, you go to Longwood and you'll see like a foxglove, 6 feet tall, perfect stalk with no staking. You know, like, just have it planted, you know, in the green, in that solarium, in this perfect condition, and they just, it's, you know, you can't. That probably is art. Gardening art, and they do a lot of sculpture. There's garden sculptures, and, you know, the way they carve out the shrubbery is beautiful. I visit Mohonk Mountain House. I will be playing piano there in the summer, in July, and they have exquisite gardens. Every year they do a theme. Like, they'll pick, I think my favorite one was they did Crayola crayons. So they had these big, like, crayons, and then they found flowers that were the exact color of the crayon and planted those.
Wow.
So if this was the magenta or this was the, you know, the husk red, it just matched the color of the crayon like a Pantone color would match.
It's pretty cool.
It was really cool theme, but every year they do a theme.
Yeah.
And that's art. It really is.